As I was saying earlier, we have a treat really, and Jennifer Ingersoll, a class of '07, who's here to really administer and lead our writing and resume workshop today. And like I said, it'll be about a half hour, maybe even shorter. We really want to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions. These slides in of itself that Jennifer and I made together, well, really, I cut some slides together and used her expertise to be like, yes, this is good. No, this is not. Will be available upon request. So just email me. We'll send you this presentation today also um, that will have the links to the cover letter, resumes, and the cover letter, resume templates, as well as some of the other things that we talk about. With that being said, before we get started on the workshop, why Jennifer Ingersoll? And I think she's best equipped to answer that question, to tell us a little bit about her background and what she's doing now and where she's doing it from. So take it away, Jen.
Thank you. So, hi everybody. So, I'm Jenny Ingersoll. As said, I'm class of 2007, and I've been working in human resources for a little over 10 years. I did about 10 years in New York, and my industries were advertising and tech. And then I moved to the UK a couple of years ago. So, currently based out of Glasgow, but working on a move to London, and I'm an HR business partner for a company called CoreSearch, which does things like brand, trademark, and copyright protection. And I support both the US and the UK, and I work very closely with our recruiters. And also, when I was at Wix, which was with the company I was at beforehand, I was not technically a recruiter, but the way that our process worked was that I was the one who was often screening resumes, often interviewing, and I worked very closely with a recruiter who told me what he'd be looking for. And so I hope what I have to talk about is helpful, and we will leave time at the end for questions. And so, hopefully it's helpful and clear. But again, at the end, if there's anything that needs clarifying or more detail, I'm happy to jump into that. So I think we can kick off with the slides.
Perfect. Thank you very much. For those on Zoom, I'm going to share a screen now so you'll be able to see the slides. Again, those who just walked in and didn't hear me before, or those who are on Zoom, you can just send me an email and I'll send you the slide presentation also. All right. And so, with that being said, the HW Works Resume and Cover Letter Workshop with Jenny Ingersoll.
Thank you. So I think a lot of this stuff might be intuitive. It might seem like, pretty obvious, but hopefully this just puts it all into a digestible overview and then some details on the nuances of it. But just as in terms of what a resume is, it's a condensed timeline of your experience, basically, where it's a component of your application that shows how you spend your time, what you value. So with that, something that's important to start is it should be clear, concise, easy to read. And with that, it's because recruiters often and often reviewers, they ideally need to be able to get an idea or overview of who you are within a few seconds before deciding to read more thoroughly. Like the recruiter I worked with would look over it quickly and had things that he was scanning for, and either then decide to read it more thoroughly or would pass. So, the easy flow, easy read is really important. And with that, it's a list of your experiences and achievements in reverse chronological order. So you can go next slide. And a bit more about that, it should be showing your trajectory, achievements, and skill sets. So what we typically recommend is that for each experience, you can have a bullet pointer summarizing the top 1 to 3 responsibilities and achievements. You can save lengthier descriptions for your most significant experiences. Sometimes that means the most recent. It's where you've had the most impact, but in general, the recommendation is to avoid vague descriptions that don't necessarily provide meaningful details about the work you did. So you can highlight the skills that will help you succeed both in school and also onwards as you start applying for things. And the sort of thing this can include can be research, writing, analysis, client work. And something that's often recommended is to begin each bullet point with an action verb, like directed, organized. And we'll give you later on some more examples of that. But essentially, you want to bring your reader in and get them really envisioning what it is that you're doing. And in addition to that, an important thing is often to quantify results. So whether it's from a internship and you increase something by X% or some sort of efficiency or some accomplishment of a percentage, but even if it's that you're tutoring students after school, how many students did you tutor? So anytime you can include a number, that's often helpful. And with that, we also recommend that you condense the list to those that are the most substantial and relevant. So it's not necessarily going to be a comprehensive list of every opportunity you've had. When you're more junior and you have less experience, yes, it might make sense that you can include more things. But again, it should just be relevant. And over time, you can think about what do I really want to highlight in every specific thing so that someone gets that snapshot of what this was. You can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of things not to include, and I'll also caveat by saying that this is in general for corporate areas, and that's what the majority of what I do. So there might be exceptions to this for a specific industry, but typically they'll reference that. They'll say, oh, please ensure you include this or this. But typically references aren't needed because either you'll be submitting letters of recommendation, and often if it is needed, not on the resume, just as part of the process, they might ask you, hey, could you please also provide 2 references? So you don't have to put it on your resume. And often even saying something like references available upon request on your resume, some people choose to do that, and you can, but I don't think it's necessary because if they want it, they will ask. And so don't worry about that, especially if you're finding trouble with length and that is an extra line of space. So it's not critical. And in terms of a lengthy list of publications or presentations, also not typically necessary, but if there's a couple you want to highlight, go for it, especially if there's one that you're proud of or that does showcase something in particular that you've achieved. And in terms of high school records or experiences that aren't relevant, again, this is similar to what I said earlier about how many bullets you're including, that if you're relatively just getting started on things, you don't have a lot, you can put some things, but with time, that sort of thing isn't always necessary, again, unless if it's really important showcasing what you do. And typically with time also, it's recommended that once you get to a certain point, you don't necessarily need to be including GPA. But if it's something you want to highlight, it's okay, but it's not critical. But then one thing in particular, anything that's identifying like pictures, age, or identifying detail for the US, at least, that's not necessary. And same goes for the UK. There are some countries that still request it. So if you were applying for something abroad, some sort of international thing, then they might ask for it. But in general, I'd say avoid it. And if you are applying for another country, you can do a quick search on that to see if it is more of a common practice there.
For our current students, that third bullet point, when we talk about awards, when we talk about community service, how much is too much?
I would say that if there's some noteworthy accomplishment, absolutely put it. For example, when I was at Harvard Westlake, I was the president of the environmental club. So I kept that for a bit because that indicated leadership. And I also included a couple of my AP scores because of the fact that they were relevant to the sort of work that I wanted to do. So I didn't include all of them, but I included the ones that were relevant. So I would say it is a little bit of a judgment call. There isn't necessarily a black and white or a black and white answer, but I would say that if you don't think it's relevant to what you're going for and it's not something you want to highlight, don't feel like you need to, but it won't hurt you if you do include it. So if you want to err on the side of caution, you can, but again, if you're struggling with space, you can eliminate based on what you think is less necessary. And with that, it is a professional document. So I highlighted this a little bit earlier, but it should be simple and easy to read, an easy flow. So bullet points that still have a lot of free space for ease of readability is great. You can limit it to 1 to 2 pages in length. And in fact, I would say try to aim for 1 page until you get to the point where you really feel like you can't get it in 1 page. Like my resume, it used to be 1 and now it's 2 pages. And typically 1 inch margins are a good idea so that it's not too heavy and condensed, but you can play with that a little bit. And I would also say just keep the formatting consistent. So similar to how we would, of course, recommend no typos, always proofreading it, always try to be consistent with the formatting. So if you use September in one area, then do the same thing somewhere else. Don't abbreviate it. Similar to how you're using locations. So if you have a state listed as California written out, if you're going to put in New York, don't put NY, put New York as the full word. And every time you make edits, do check for typos. I once was editing my resume, and after I had sent it out a couple of times, I realized that I had misspelled employee, which is not great if you work in HR, when I would put employee relations. So just always do a double check. And especially for very popular or competitive opportunities, sometimes a typo can be an automatic rejection just because there's so many that they're going through that they almost need a reason to say no to someone. So just always take a look and make sure that it's correct every time. And also, go ahead.
So the idea that more reason to be eliminated than it is, almost exercising or showing greatness. I'm glad you said that about the typos being almost automatic eliminations for a lot of people. So it can be cold like that.
Yeah. And in general, I would say there are exceptions to this, but I would avoid graphics, pictures, or colored fonts, especially if you're applying for something more corporate. Traditional is more appropriate. And if it's a design related role or a sort of role where you would be actually showcasing that, then you can go a little more creative. I once, when I worked at an ad agency, I received someone's resume in the mail that was in the form of a little fortune teller, like the paper had been folded up and it was, you opened each one and it said their experiences, but they were applying for a very specific role. So it made sense. But in general, keep it clean. And part of that also is just simply the fact that sometimes if you're using strange formatting or graphics, then what's called an applicant tracking system, an ATS, can have trouble reading it. And we'll talk more about that in a moment, but essentially, the more simple it is in terms of the formatting, the easier it is for a tracker to read it. So we're not going to spend too much time on this just because this is more of a thought starter. And when you go back home or later on, you can do this in a little bit more detail. But just we can spend a couple of minutes just thinking about some meaningful full-time, part-time work, study experience, anything you want to think about that you've had. And in this exercise, and Kwasi, you can tell me on how much time, how we're doing time-wise on if we want to go through this, but what this looks like is essentially listing those things that are meaningful to you. And then within that, thinking about the most substantial experiences that you've had. And then within that, thinking about the which things you'd want to highlight and showcase. And then do the same for anything else you might have, whether it's extracurricular, volunteer work, and anywhere you might have taken some initiative. And with those, then think on a couple of ways you would turn those into line items. So bullet points. And the key is starting each one with an action verb. So maybe right now we just do one or two.
Absolutely. You guys have your laptops, you have everything, phones. It's something that you can think of. It's 119, so we'll maybe go to 120 for it. So it's something that you can think about or do right now as far as some of the experiences that you've had, starting them with those action verbs, right? And then going from there. All right, we'll go for literally about a minute and then
Okay.
the next one. And then, like I said, if you want these slides, send me an email. I'll send you the slides also with Jenny's contact in case you have any more questions. You're getting it from one of the best. So it's important to take advantage of this resource that we have.
And essentially, once you have done that, or I guess we'll give it a couple of minutes, sorry.
It's all right. You can go ahead. We can keep going.
Okay, or maybe I'll just give it one more minute.
To take that format, right?
Yeah.
Education, experience, activities.
And I think also with that, not only the action verbs, but anything quantifiable.
Right? Increased sales by 10%.
Or if you were in a club, if you, when you took a leadership position, if you increase the number of members or the number of events, whatever it might be. Okay, well, I think we can then go into this. So we have a sample resume template that goes into this in a bit more detail, but the way you can then break it down is by education, experience, activities, and skills and interest. And then within that, you can do different educational institutions, like if you did a summer program, if you, and for those who might be listening, who are alums, high school, college, any grad school, any honors earned. And then with the experience, you can list all of those. And again, as we've talked about earlier, any sort of noteworthy projects, accomplishments. Same goes for activities. And then with skills, how you want to divide this up can depend on what you're applying for, how many different types of categories you have. So some people might break within skills, have a bullet for each, like their technical skills, their like program skills, languages spoken, and some people might put it all on one line. That's sort of a judgment call based on what sort of thing you're applying for and what you want to highlight. And I think we might not need to go through this
Kind
one
of sort
because
of
we
already
already did
covered it. Yeah.
yeah. And as we mentioned earlier, this is a quick example of different action verbs. So led, supervised, managed, motivated. As you can see, all of these are just calling, it gives you this feeling of you doing something. And what I have typically done, just in terms of the fact that these are all in the past tense, is for my prior experiences, I'll typically use the past tense. And for a current role or something I'm currently still doing, I'll use the present tense. And so, like with my current job, I'll say that I'm, actively working with employees on performance management or on career development and progression. While if it's a past job, I'll say that I had led that. But again, you'll as you are doing your resume, you'll probably get a feeling of what makes sense based on what is just happening in the present. And here's another example of breaking it down a little bit more. You can see that you have what you're doing, who you're doing it for, when you did it, and the different things that are happening. You can also include a location. So I typically do that where I'll have the city and the state, or now that I'm also abroad, I have the country. And you can see within this, there's the action verbs at the start, and then there's also numbers listed, like 46,000 applicants. And in the second one, you'll see that they're scheduled and interviewed approximately 100 students a week. So those two numbers really call out what you're doing.
What you did and what happened as a result of what you did.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. The why essentially and the impact. And these are the sort of things that you can always think about, sort of off of what was just said, like what you did and why you did it and what was the impact. The sort of things you can include with that is problem solving skills, advancement, taking initiative. Taking initiative is something that is really, really valued. I think every single job interview I've ever had, someone has asked, tell me about a time you took initiative. And that doesn't have to be actively a leadership role. It can be in a non-leadership role and you just saw something and you thought, oh, this could be made better, or I could fix this. I could make this even better. So always think about those little things you did. The smallest contribution can make a difference in how you present yourself. And with that, it's what will you bring? What will others learn from you? and also very critically communicating effectively. I think knowing how to write and have that skill of communicating well with others is just incredibly important. So, and you don't have to just showcase those quantitative things. There's also the qualitative things that you can showcase.
For the current student sitting here, Jenny, and I know we have kind of a catbird seat. You doing it really in depthly at a high level professionally, and me kind of sort of doing it over years, focus on schools and students. There's a lot of crossover here between the types of things that make you attractive for a job, and for those of you sitting here currently, that make you attractive for that next step where you're headed after Harvard Westlake. What will you bring? What will others learn from you? It's pretty good stuff to put in an essay if you're applying for something else after Harvard Westlake.
And with that, a resume can also be a chance to explain something. So I think post COVID, gaps in employment are a lot more common. Gaps in education. So in the past, I think that was a little bit more of a taboo, but gaps are okay in general, but I'd say anytime you can put something in, you can do it. So on my LinkedIn, for example, when I left New York and moved to the UK, I didn't work for about 6 months or so, partially just because I took a break. I also had to get my visa sorted, and then I had to look for a job again. So on my LinkedIn, in between my jobs, there was a gap there where I said what I did. I took a couple of online courses. I caught up on, I hadn't read up on things like astronomy and some psychology things in a while. So I put it there because that's how I filled up my time. So it's okay to have gaps, and, you don't always have to explain what it is. Sometimes it's personal and private, but don't hesitate if you have something you want to put in. It can be for a change in graduation date, and especially when you might be applying for something and the path isn't entirely clear. For example, you might be applying for a summer internship that is in the medical field, where the resume might reflect more of an interest in history or arts. You can have ways to manage that. You can have multiple resume versions tailored accordingly. So I have two different resumes, one where I'm applying more for a operations role within HR versus a business partner role. You can highlight transferable skills. So we talked earlier about things like the writing skills, critical thinking. So often a transferable skill is the way you can get your foot in the door on something new. I haven't worked in HR my whole life. I had my first couple of years out of college. I was working for an ad agency, but on the advertising side. So I, made a case for myself. I had a resume that reflected how I could use those skills I gained in advertising, like communication, people, working with other teams, managing stakeholders. I put that, and then I got the HR role. And you can also have a brief summary at the top of your resume indicating your interests or what you are seeking. And you can always put a bit about that either for a pivot, or if you don't yet have experience in something and you just want to show how you can still contribute. And the key, though, is not necessarily making that too long. And that's where the cover letter comes into play. And we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yep, we got about 18 minutes to your class starts, about 13 minutes until we said we go. This
Okay.
template, Jenny, I forgot to tell you, I actually share it with everybody who meets with me at work. So many people have probably seen this.
Okay.
Right.
So we can probably.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think we probably don't need to go into it because that's also something we can find online pretty easily. But yeah, we can talk about the applicant tracking system just because I mentioned it earlier, and these are becoming more and more common. So these stats might seem intense. These are from Harvard and Yale Career Service Centers, but don't panic. It's just the way it's set up these days. But so it is true that AI systems are being used more and more to go through resumes, especially for a company like a Google. They're receiving 50 to 70,000 resumes a week, and some corporate positions might receive 1,250. I know for myself, when I've looked at roles, especially right now with this, the way that the climate is right now, the role has been open for a day, and it'll show 100 resumes that have already been applied, have already been submitted. But The thing is that with the ones that are getting automatically rejected, that's for specific roles. So it's not that 90 to 95% of resumes are always automatically rejected. That's for specific instances using Google data. But the key takeaway from this is that there are a lot of companies using an ATS. So in the extreme cases, yes, what an ATS do will make the decision for the recruiter of who they're going to even look at. But more often, something that also is just happening is it's giving a little bit of a summary. So the way that it works at my company is that it'll go through, highlight key skills, and match them to whatever the job description said. So with that, what's key is just getting past that. It's knowing how to get past that ATS so that the recruiter does look at it more thoroughly. And granted, you do also have instances where every single resume gets looked at, but this is just going to be a bit of tips for how to get past that. So if you want to go to the next slide. So essentially, it's a system that's looking for often things like keywords or certain things like skills listed. And so what's really important is that you write your bullet points to align with that position description. And also using clear headings and generic formatting, because sometimes if you use a creative design, even if it looks good when you're looking at it on a PDF, when it goes through the system, that can confuse it because it's trying to find words and it's getting distracted by like the text boxes. So in general, what I would recommend is write your resume in Word and then convert it to a PDF because that's easy to read. A LinkedIn URL is also, if you have one, is also a good thing to add. It gives them another picture of you. I know recruiters who, even if they have the resume, they're going to look at the LinkedIn just to read through it more quickly. But in terms of getting through the ATS, one thing I recommend is it's cumbersome and it can be annoying, but if you really, really want to stand out, I would say modify your resume slightly if it's missing something that's in that job description. So if you see a job that you want to apply for and it's really interesting to you, I would see if there's any key things in it, like a programming language or some skill set that you have, and it might not be as common, and make sure it's in your resume, because that's the sort of thing that the ATS is looking for. And with time, we'll probably go more in that direction of using that just with the increase of use of AI. But, the key, though, is just getting it in front of a human who can then really understand who you are. And with that, on AI, it's becoming more common. I know a lot of people who use AI in their resume. I don't, just because I'm maybe a slow adopter, we can say, but I know it's becoming more and more common. But if you are going to use AI, that's okay, but make sure you don't lose that human touch. So what I recommend people do in those instances is that you still do an original and have some specific prompts, and the AI might give you something, but then always look at it again, always put it back into your words or tweak it again. So what it can do is improve some descriptions. It can highlight some important things. It can give you good action verbs to use and also help you with a summary statement, but it also can read as AI or read a little bit clunky. So sometimes I can tell when something's been read by AI, and you probably hear this similarly in school of like, just I'd say if you're going to use it mildly and to enhance whatever you've already said. So it shouldn't write it for you, but it should just improve what you want to say and what you've already written.
Get that block text full of like industry jargon, and it's like these just seem like mumbled keywords together. We're at the cover letter.
And
You got like 12 minutes left, Jenny, something like that.
okay, so I'll be quick with this. So a cover letter, and I'll be quick partially because it's not always important, but we'll go quickly that it's basically it's an opening, a middle, and a concluding. And always think about, what are they looking for? What do you want to highlight? And maybe something that your resume hasn't highlighted. And why do you want to work for this employer? And why is this position of interest to you? And so a note on this is there is an ongoing debate of how important these are and if recruiters actually read them. So sometimes they're just used as a weeder where the recruiter isn't actually going to read them, but the fact that you did it in the first place is a signal that you are really passionate about the opportunity and you want it. But Often the way it is that I would recommend it is if a cover letter is recommended or in fact indicated that it's required, please do submit one. If there is no prompt for one, typically don't worry about it. Or if it's optional, then use it if it will help you and use it to your advantage. So sometimes this can allow you to go into a little bit more detail on your resume that you otherwise couldn't have listed because it would be too cumbersome. And especially if you want to pivot into something new, or if your resume doesn't necessarily line up with something you're applying to, you can use a cover letter as an example to say, hey, I know that I don't show this, but this is why I still want it. This is how I'm working to get there. This is why I'm passionate about that opportunity. So the cover letter is essentially supposed to enhance either something that was missing from your resume that you couldn't highlight or show why you want to do something else. So probably pretty self-explanatory, but it's the opening is who are you? What are you applying for? Make the connection. Why is it interesting to you? And a couple of things about why you have the skill set for it. And then the middle one is going into those in more detail, highlighting those, saying why they're relevant and, what sort of thing you can bring to the table for that position. And the key with that is not restating your resume. And that's why I said it's not necessarily critical. But again, if there's something you want to go into more detail, that's maybe a bullet on your resume. And then on the paragraph, you can say, more about that and why it's relevant to this position and how you can then make the impact for them and how you'd have that impact in the past and how you can bring it to this present opportunity. And then lastly, you can summarize any qualification that's relevant, reiterate your interest, thank them for their time and for the consideration, and invite them to speak with you further about the opportunity. So, and one thing I do with my cover letter is the top of the resume format where you can put your contact info. I mimic that format and put it there on my cover letter too, just so they can easily find it again. And
So
I guess
that many of them that if you've seen me, it works, and many of you've already received it. And we've got questions. There's Jenny's contact, of course, my contact. We did it, Jenny. We did it in a little more than a half hour, about 36 minutes. You guys got about 9 minutes until class starts. So if you're cognizant of that, feel free. And then we've got about 9 minutes, I guess, till this ends. Are there any questions, concerns, commentary? No? Oh, we got one. Go ahead.
Like this sort of class or lesson was focused on writing resumes for future jobs and opportunities. How does it differ for high school students who are looking to actually highlight and focus on their high school achievements? Because I know earlier on you said that we shouldn't highlight too much of our high school accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are in high school, what else should we talk about?
Yep. And so that is also caveated with, knowing that we do have different audience members at this. So if that is your main area of focus, absolutely go for it and go ahead and highlight as much as you want to. But I'd say think about it more as don't feel like you have to list everything. But obviously if you are in school and that's your main thing, that's fine. And go ahead.
I'd also highlight something that Jenny said earlier, that while you all are in high school, part of this is getting you to think beyond. Some of you are going to be leaving in a few months, right? So this is a professional document. So highlight your high school experiences, but make sure those experiences are guiding this professional document towards the professional opportunity that you want. Anyone else? Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. We got, like I said, if you want this slideshow, just send me an email. It's got Jenny's contact on it, as well as my own. This recording will be up before midnight tonight. I've got to take the bus home. So it'll take me a few hours. It'll be up before midnight tonight in the resources section on the platform. Jenny Ingersoll from the UK, class of 07. Thank you so much for leading this discussion. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. And that'll be it. Next week, is identifying internship and job postings that are appropriate for you. Jenny, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. No, thank you guys for attendance. This is fantastic.
Reach out with any questions that are specific. I'm happy to address that too.
Absolutely. Let me stop the recording, stop sharing, and stop the recording.